Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Maddie Hornsby. I'm the project manager for the Riot organization. Welcome to the Riot Lunch and Learn series. This is a place where we spotlight Riot sponsors. Today, we have with us Anjali Shingala with Acceleration to give an introduction into Agile with Trello. Just a couple reminders before we get started. This event is being recorded and will be posted to Riot's YouTube channel and uploaded to the meetup page where you registered for this event. If you have any questions, please place those in the chat and we will answer those throughout the presentation. And then please keep yourself muted throughout the entire event. Cool. With that being said, I will pass it over to Anjali. Anjali, welcome.
Hey, Maddie. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to give you guys an intro into Agile and Trello. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and Maddie can give me a nod when she can see it. Awesome. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation up. Alrighty, awesome. So as I mentioned, this is going to be an intro into Agile, specifically using a really simple tool that really anyone can get started with, which is Trello. So let's go ahead and get started. So a little bit about me. So I am our delivery manager here at Acceleration. I was actually a former intern for them, worked out in a different company for a while, and then ultimately decided to come back just because I love our mission just that much. Another fantastic thing is we have a sister company called NextUp Solutions, and that's where we do Agile training and coaching. So if this is something you're interested in and learning more about Agile and actually getting certified with it, I highly recommend looking into NextUp Solutions. I've gotten all my certifications with them. So I am Scrum Master certified, Advanced Scrum Master certified, as well as Product Owner certified, and automated testing and development. So got quite a few in there and planning to get some more. We've got some fantastic teachers over there. Little fun thing about me, I very much enjoy learning about personal finance and implementing that. So that keeps my time busy. Also, I love to cook and go on walks. So those will come into play a little bit later as we get into some examples when we're working with Trello. But cool, that's a little bit about me. And then I've got here a quick little blurb about Acceleration. So Acceleration is a software consulting firm. We build and design custom software for clients. We have done quite a bit of work with startup community, which I know Riot works with closely. So if that's something you're interested in just talking about, or even looking for a software consulting firm to work with, feel free to reach out to us. Cool. So I'm going to jump right in to the actual content of the day. So this is our intro to Agile. Awesome. So what is Agile? You hear the word all the time, and we're not talking about track stars being super agile while they go. We're really looking at the methodology to approach development. And the big thing with this is it's iterative. Before we had a commonly known phrase as waterfall development, which means, hey, I'm going to give you, I want a website built. This is what I'm thinking about. Here's 6 months or a year. Go ahead and go make it and then come back to me. As you can imagine, there's quite a few issues that can come up when you do that. You don't know exactly what you want at that time. It doesn't come out exactly how you want it. So if you're not getting a chance as a stakeholder to take a look at that throughout the process, more times than not, you are going to end up with a product that you do not like, which is why we love to do Agile. By going through an iterative approach, you can keep going back and getting the feedback you need through that loop so that your project can end up how you want it to. And additionally, you don't have to wait the full year for it to come out. You can work on developing a small incremental piece, what we like to call the MVP, the minimal viable product, and use that product to go to market earlier than the 1 year mark. So you can put out the absolutely necessary features and then just do enhancements from there. There's a lot of benefits to doing that. So Agile has a framework that kind of helps, or a methodology that does really well with that. To go one step further, Agile is an umbrella idea and concept of doing iterative approaches. There's multiple ways that this can be done. The one that we are going to dive deeper into today is called Scrum. This is the most commonly used one in industry today. That being said, there are plenty of other ones that can be useful for your situations. So I highly recommend looking into them. I would say probably the second biggest one is Kanban, and they use that a lot, not only in project development industries, but in fulfillment centers as well. So if you have physical products that you're working with, that's something that can definitely be utilized for that. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and go on. So next one was, what is Scrum? So as I mentioned, this is the most commonly used one today. So Scrum is, I've pulled the definition here from Scrum Alliance. It's really a framework to help the teams go through that iterative approach with a little bit more structure. The concept of wanting to do an approach, where you come back to stakeholders, you develop and you come back, is great. And I think there's an overarching understanding of that's what we want, which is really what Agile is. Scrum takes it one step further to be able to give that that structure around how do we go about this? What, who are the members involved with it? What kinds of meetings need to go with this, so that it is something that can be replicated in multiple and different style situations. I'm going to take a break here and ask if there are any questions. I do have quite a bit of time left at the end for Q&A, but I just want to make sure the foundational pieces are good before we move forward. Okay. I've learned that somebody told me that it takes 6 seconds of silence for anyone to actually speak up. That's the general time frame. So I give an awkward 6-second silence there for that. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going. And Maddie, we are good in the chat room.
All good in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks. Cool. So the next question is, when do you use Scrum? So there's definitely situations where it is better and not. So one is if there's changing requirements or resources, there's things that we can't control all the time. If your product is based on a market study that comes out every year, you need to be able to adapt every year with that. Being able to have resources that change out, and you can adapt to that quickly. So if you have, a development team of 5-6 people and the, retention rate isn't very high, Scrum allows for that transfer to happen much smoother. And I apologize, it looks like some of my text got messed up here. But another is if you want to do multiple versions or iterations. So as I mentioned before, there's the concept of the MVP. What is the bare minimum we have to do to get the functionality out there to the market so we can get there faster? And there is multiple reasons that you could want to get to the market faster. You could have competition. You want to learn from that. Oftentimes you want to put something out, see how users actually interact with it, and take those findings and develop further from there. Because just as you as a stakeholder don't want to give a development team a year to go away and do work and come back with a website you don't like as that person, you also have your end users oftentimes. So if you're developing a website that is put out to the mass public, it's kind of nice to be able to get some of the mass public information in there too, which you can do throughout the process for sure. And then lastly is if you're working with either a single team or especially in cross teams. Scrum is extremely beneficial because there is that extra structure put around it. And additionally, there are ways that have already been documented and put out by the Scrum Alliance of how to grow your team. And so that way you can have things like Scrum of Scrums, which is basically you can have multiple Scrum teams and then have a way for all those Scrum teams to come together. So this is great if you're working on a really big project and you have 3-4 development teams that are working on it. This also works great if you have folks in different countries. I've worked with that kind of structure where we have offshore teams. So there's a lot of different ways that it can be beneficial, but even within your single team, it is really nice to be able to have that interaction where you guys have complete transparency with each other with what work is going on. And I'll go a little bit further into kind of what that is in the next couple of slides. I'm gonna take a little 6-second break, not only for you guys, but for me as well. Alrighty. I apologize if I talk too fast. So who is involved in this? So a Scrum team is comprised of all of these folks. Firstly is your Scrum Master. Your Scrum Master is there. I like to think of them as the bridge between all the components that are going on. Additionally, they're the ones in charge of a lot of these, we like to call them ceremonies. And the product owner is the person who is ultimately responsible for the outgoing product. So I'll give you the example of, I work in the consulting world. For us, oftentimes our product owner can actually come from our clients. So our clients who come to us and say, hey, I want this app developed, they can have somebody identified on their team to be our product owner and say, this is what we're looking for. These are the components we would like had. And additionally, at the end of the day, make sure those are the components that they got. You may say, hey, I'd like, a button put onto the page, but if the development team gives you a round button and you're looking for a square button, it's your job as the product owner at the end of the day to give that a final check mark. So if it's not what you wanted, you need to give that feedback to your team of, this is how we're considering this to be done. So I'm oversimplifying it just so the concepts make sense. But I'm hoping that it's coming through to you guys as this can be scaled up to much, much larger things that you can be working on. And then lastly is your development team. So these are the folks that are working on developing the products or the projects and implementing them. There's a whole course on actually getting certified as a developer in the Scrum world, because it isn't just having the ability to, for the example of software development, to being able to code. There's much more that goes into that to work into a Scrum environment to make sure that you are aligning so that this whole Scrum team is successful. And so I'm gonna give my 6-second break and see if there are any questions. Take advantage of my water break. Oh, awesome. I saw a message come through to me. So how can solo entrepreneurs and small startups apply these Scrum and Agile methodologies? Yeah, so there is these are not, limited to large teams. The whole concept is around having an iterative approach so that it is, well documented of this is what I've tried and this is how I progressed from it. So I want to get a little bit further into my slides because hopefully that will help answer it, but I will keep this question in the back of my mind. So just as a reminder, one of the questions that's been asked is around how do solo people or small startups apply these methodologies? Awesome. All righty. Gonna go ahead and go forward. Okay. And then I got another question, and I will stay on this slide for that, is what are the requirements of a Scrum Master, i.e. not a boss? And that is completely right. All of these folks on this page, Scrum Master, Product Owner, and Development Team, are on the same level. No one should be the boss of the other. That can lead to a lot of issues just in terms of not feeling comfortable going to folks on this, and just not making the right environment that we are going for when we're using Scrum principles. When it comes to being a Scrum Master, you will be in charge of a lot of these ceremonies, as I've mentioned, and I'll have kind of a diagram of them in a couple slides here. So you'll go through the ceremonies. So as I mentioned, Scrum is a much more structured version of Agile. And there is a certain amount of work that goes behind that. There is a way that all of this is tracked. And so Scrum Master is especially beneficial in that. I was told when I was first learning about being Scrum Master, I think a joking fashion, but a slightly serious one, is a Scrum Master is at risk of losing their job every day. And that is not to make you fearful of being a Scrum Master, but the reality is you are trying to help optimize this team to be as self-sufficient as they can be. So your job is to, if a development team is having an issue, they will go to their Scrum Master with those issues and say, hey, I haven't been able to get requirements. I need to get them to be able to do my development. And that's where the Scrum Master could have to go to external stakeholders or to the product owner and be like, hey, we need to get this. And so they often are going through the crosshairs of that. So the Scrum Masters do have quite a bit of interaction that they do. So that is definitely a requirement to be a Scrum Master, to be willing to go through those conversations. So hopefully that helped answer that question for you. Alrighty, I am not seeing any other chats at this time, so I'm going to go ahead and go on. Of course. Okay, there we go. Oh, perfect. It was the next slide. So this is a diagram of the Scrum Framework. My personal belief when it comes to Scrum is you do what works best for your team. This is my opinion as an individual who has practiced Scrum, opposed to somebody who's trying to, preach what it is. I think every team I have ever been on has had a flavor of Scrum, but I have not come across a team that does this exactly to the T. But this overarching framework is pretty across the board, which is you will start with a product backlog. And what a product backlog is this is all the stuff I want in my product. I'm building a website. I want a way for my users to log in. I want a way for them to navigate around. I want a header on my page, whatever it may be, is all listed out for you here in this product backlog. So this is everything that you want in your product. Where some of the structure of Scrum comes in is when it comes to sprints. So everything beyond this is in sprints. A sprint can be anywhere between 1 to 4 weeks long. And the structure that Scrum provides is that's how long you have for your iteration. So sometimes it takes some time for teams to figure out how long they would like their sprints to be. Typically, I have come across 2-week sprints. That's not to say 1 week does not work for folks or 4 weeks doesn't. But it's definitely something that is project dependent. But ultimately what that means is at the end of that 2-week time frame, you will be having a report out, which a report out's not the right really word for it. It's a sprint review where you're looking for feedback on it really. And that's where you're saying, here, stakeholders, this is what we've done in the last, for example, 2-week sprint. What do you guys think of it? Is this aligned with what your product vision was? I can develop you a circle button or a square button, but what is this aligned to what you wanted at the end of the day? And so these sprints are how we really make that iterative piece where we get to have a nice big circle in the middle where we're going through it over and over again. And then you can see these arrows just make a circle where you're going back and working on this over and over again. So from here, from sprint planning, which means I'm going to start figuring out what's going into, this 2-week sprint. What are the pieces we're going to bring in? We're going to bring in putting in a navigation bar, a header, a user login page. Those are the features that we're going to be bringing in for us. Fantastic. From there, we go to, this is what our sprint backlog is. So that backlog is saying, so planning is what do we want to bring in? The backlog is what we are bringing in. So this is actually written out. I want the header. I want the navigation bar. I want the user login. So those features are written out here in this backlog. So your development team knows this is what I'll be working on for the next 2 weeks. Then from here, you have your team. So in this diagram, you've got, this would be your development team, your Scrum Master, and your product owner. So that's why you've got the 3 different colors of little emojis in here. So that's what those people signify, because it is the full Scrum team working on these iterations. We do have in Scrum, we utilize what's called the daily Scrum. Daily Scrum is a 15-minute meeting in the morning to talk about what's going on, to align everyone on what progress is being made. The most common method that I have seen is a kind of 3-bulleted method. 1, what did you work on yesterday? 2, what do you plan to work on today? 3, do you have any blockers? And those blocker pieces can be taken care of by other developers, saying, hey, I can't figure out this bug. It's really it's really messing me up. I'm stuck. And another developer can go, oh, I've worked on that. Let's talk about it. And so that way people aren't siloed on working on these issues. And then second fold is your Scrum Master's there with you. So you say, hey, I've been working on this thing, but I haven't been able to get, somebody or stakeholder to get back to us yet. Can you follow up with them? And then that's where the Scrum Master role can really come into play, is, helping remove those blockers from the team. That's why I love Scrum Mastering, because for me, my personal career, my goal is to help others have an easier time. I find a lot of satisfaction in that. And most Scrum Masters I know do too. That's what they're really there to help with, is remove those blockers, which really helps the overall team become more efficient, which is why they are an integral part of a Scrum team. And then from there, you've got your box here at the end, which is your increment. And so that increment there is, here is something that is actually packaged up that we can show to people. So at the end of a sprint, you're typically looking for, and this is again by Scrum principles, of looking for a shippable product. And that means if we needed to, at the end of those 2 weeks, sure, send it out to the client. You can send this out into the world and it should all completely function. In my personal experience with working with other teams, typically we don't release at the end of every sprint. I've definitely been on teams that do it. I know a team right now that has 1 week sprints and ships their product out every week. And that is what the client wants, and that is fantastic for them. That being said, not everyone wants to do that. It's completely fine to not have an actual release go out, but you should have a product that could go out. And I think that's the big difference, right? Is it should be something that is completely functional at the end of a sprint, but it does not actually need to go out. I worked for a client who their clients needed extra time and needed many tutorials for any changes that happened. So opposed to having to send out tutorials and documentation for every change that was made, they preferred to do that every couple of months. So that way they could take the lift all at one time, opposed to having to say, here are 3 feature updates. They would prefer saying, here are 30 feature updates. And it's a big version release for them. So there's many reasons why you could want to do this. But the goal is that it is a potential shippable product at the end of every sprint. And the last thing, as I alluded to before, is the sprint review. And this is where you get all your stakeholders into a room. Right now, probably a virtual room, but before we used to have big conference rooms that we rented out. And, we booked for every 2 weeks, and we would actually go through and demo. These are the features that we have added in here. What are your thoughts? And this is not only limited to the Scrum team. So, it's not just the Scrum Master, product owner, and development team. We take it a step further, and oftentimes people will invite stakeholders. So who is our end user? I can be a product owner and know what the product needs to be, but I could not use it every day. For example, I was a development team that developed software for an operations team. So we would have folks from the operations team come to our sprint review and be like, is this something that will actually work for you guys going forward? I know what the product needs to be. I understand your business use case, but what do you guys think of it? Because at the end of the day, you're the ones using it. And then from here, the sprint review is also the best place to get tons of feedback. And this is where that iterative approach starts to come in, is because what you get from that feedback either goes into the product backlog or are not actually features that you want to come out of it, but it's also, hey, it was really tough to get in touch with our stakeholders this, sprint. Can we come up with a better way? And those are the kinds of conversations you have in a sprint retrospective. So the sprint retrospective is something that should be done at the end of every sprint to discuss how did the sprint go and get feedback. I will say this is the best place to have and this is the Scrum team doing it. This is the best place for your Scrum team you need to build an environment, the Scrum Master to build the environment where it is comfortable to have these conversations. So oftentimes you do not want people in there who are managers or bosses, just from the perspective of you want people to be able to be candid about things, because at the end of the day, you want the feedback. You want to be able to make it better. But if people are fearful of bringing up the issues, it makes it really difficult to learn from them if you don't bring up them. So I love the concept of fail fast. That's what I always tell the people I work with, and people I work with tell me is it's okay if you don't know how to do it, or if that went terribly, completely fine. Let's talk about it and let's see what we can do to move forward and make it better for next time. So it's not only your product gets better, but you as a team gets better. And I think that's one of my favorite things when it comes to Scrum. And then what comes out of those retrospectives, oftentimes you will come out with some action items that you want to work with. For example, hey, you developed something, but it ended up breaking my thing. An action item that could come out of that is, let's write some automated tests. That way, if one developer goes in and breaks something unintentionally, the tests will tell us. So that is an action item that has come out of one of my retrospectives before. So there's definitely multiple beneficial reasons to having that sprint retrospective in all of these different meetings throughout. So I'm going to take an extra long break here to ask if there are any questions. Awesome. Alrighty. Are employee oddball behaviors except with dealt with on Scrum level? Okay. So I'm assuming you're referencing one employee is not, living up to their potential or the potential of what the team is looking for. Um, a fantastic place for that to come out is the sprint retrospective and I think there's a lot that can be done in terms of learning about how to give feedback. Personally, I read a book called Radical Candor, and I thought it was a fantastic book, just on how to give feedback to people who receive feedback in different ways. Because how I give feedback to one person could be very different on how somebody else would receive it. So if there are issues, I think the best is to discuss the issue at hand of, hey, this story was not completed opposed to this individual. If it does continue to be an issue, that is something that typically will come out of those retrospective notes of, hey, it's the same people working on those stories that are coming up. That's where you can get some of those oddball people identified. And sometimes you don't even realize that it's one individual. It's just, hey, every sprint, we have so many stories that pull over. We don't understand what's going on. And then ultimately you can figure that out with iterations of this. And whether it needs to be escalated or, honestly, sometimes it's just unaware. Like sometimes you just don't realize that, hey, I'm falling behind or I'm not asking for help fast enough. That fail fast concept, I think is fantastic for this of, hey, if you don't know how to do something, come to me with it, and having that open environment where you truly mean that. So hopefully that kind of helps with answering that question. How has virtual made Scrum Master better or harder? Oof. It's definitely been different, I will say. There was, I think, for me, at least the biggest thing that was really hard is building that environment, and where people really felt comfortable to have those open conversations and also feel comfortable enough with each other to ask for help. At least in my experience as being part of a development team, as well as a Scrum Master, it's hard to be able to be like, hey, can you, work on this? It's much easier to get siloed. So I will say it's hard that in that sense, it's hard. And I think that's just in any general part of being virtual. I think the really nice thing about Scrum itself, though, is the fact that you do have daily interactions with your team. With the virtual world, everyone's that I know still does daily scrums. It's just on Zoom, right? And so you still are, getting online. These daily scrums are meant to be really quick. So 15 minutes is kind of the max that you're kind of looking for with getting out all of that information of how are all your developers doing. So it's not meant to be, here's our problem solving time. It's here's our identification time. What has made it better? Let me think for that. There's definitely things that have made it better. Firstly, I think people have gotten better at being able to keep track of what's going on. I think before there was a little bit more of a disconnect as to where are things and how to be self-sufficient when it comes to finding answers to things. I think everyone's just gotten a little bit better with the Google and being able to find those pieces, but also having the ability to I mentioned failing fast, but at the same time, you don't want somebody to fail fast the second something comes hard to them for them to say, hey, I need help. I think there's a lot of benefit to using something like time boxing. Give yourself 30 minutes, go hard at it, try to figure out what the issue is. If you can't figure it out, then come to me. And I think that, being virtual, it gives you that chance to not have everyone coming at you too. You have the ability to say, hey, I'm on do not disturb right now, and go heads down in that. When you're at your desk, it's just kind of like, hey, I got a quick question. So in that sense, it's kind of nice because you can keep your train of thought going. Oop. Awesome. I've got there's other tools, yes, like Mira and Mural, that have been great and have adopted to virtual, and I think right now, especially hybrid worlds. That's the biggest thing that I have been keeping an eye out for, is because, as I've mentioned, I've worked with what's it called, international teams. So we're not all in a room together, and we're also not all online at the same time. So how do you handle that where one team is all in person with each other, or virtual, and some people are actually in office with each other? How does that all work together? And I'm answering some questions, but we are about to get to Trello. So that's coming up in just a minute here. So any other last minute questions about the Scrum framework? Hopefully this was helpful to kind of see what the structure looks like, and that it can definitely be implemented for small teams, but also for large teams, but also those small startup style businesses. I'm about to show you guys what Trello is, and that's a fantastic, very quick and easy to spin up tool for teams to utilize. And the benefit thing is they also have a free version. So it's a great way to not only use it for your work stuff. I used it for like my home stuff as well. I know people who use Scrum boards for doing chores. Like that's how they do their weekly chores. A sprint is a week, and that's how they get their laundry done, their vacuuming. So it is not just about software development. And I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear at the beginning. That is one of the big use cases of it, and that has been my experience. So that's what I can speak best to. But like I said, I know people who have them for chores. I used to have it when I was in college for homework. So there's a lot of benefits to them. So for sake of time, I'm gonna keep going forward. So how do we keep track of what work we want to have done? So this is where user stories come in. This is what the business value you're providing is. The most common method of this is as a blank. So as a user of the website, I want to blank. I want to log into the website so that blank, so that I can access my account. So that so that concept is kind of how we really pull out what the business value is, because I've seen it happen on teams where you can pick up a story, you can put in that button, you can put in that text box, but there is a lot more that happens if there's an actual understanding of what the underlying business value is, because developers are humans too. We like to know what we're going after. So there is a lot of benefit to being able to provide that business value. Additionally, then you know what value are you going to get at the end of that sprint. I know what all the features are going to be, who the users they're going to be affecting, and now what they'll be able to do. And that's just by putting together and I put index cards here because you can literally write this all out on an index card and title it, log in, right? So what I want to be able to do is log in as a user. And this way you can have that index card to keep track of, this is the feature that I want access to. Another thing with user stories, oftentimes people will assign a relevant size to them. A big thing when it comes to doing this is to not allocate time to them, just because these are estimates. You don't really know how long it's going to take until you're in it. So sometimes people will use what's called the Fibonacci sequence, because the difference between a 3 and a 4 shouldn't be that large. You're relative doing it anyways. Let's do a 3 and a 5. And if you're getting really large, you go up to an 8. Additionally, I've seen, t-shirt sizes, as they call it, small, medium, large, just give me a relative idea of, is this a big honker I'm picking up or something that's a little bit smaller? And then additionally, especially with these virtual boards like Trello I'm about to show you, it's a great way to track the supporting details too. So you have the ability to comment on them, put updates on them. So if you were to reference back to them, you have those details. Additionally, oftentimes I'll see in sprint plannings, we'll put in these virtual boards some notes about what these stories are. I see you got a couple of chats. Awesome. Cool. So let's go ahead and get to what Scrum boards are. And then I think there's a desire to go ahead and take a look at Trello. Cool. And I agree. I think we should put that on a t-shirt. Developers are humans too. Awesome. So we're going here into what a Scrum board is. So, I put a little graphic up here at the top. It's really to track the progress of what's going on. And I think that has a lot to do with the transparency that comes with Scrum. So you're checking what, you can keep track of what the feature and also in general, the project progression is. You can track metrics like those points or those t-shirt sizes, so hey, I can bring in 4 mediums and 2 smalls in every sprint. And that's relatively how much we fit. And the fantastic thing about that is then next time, hey, this is relatively how much we can do. Again, I'm not saying to say, hey, these are, set to time, but you have a better idea of how much work that you can do. So getting to the part that everyone's excited for is intro to Trello. So I'm going to go ahead and start with what is Trello. So Trello is an online organizational board that can be used for Agile. So they're set up as a Kanban style board, which, as I mentioned, is a different type of Agile, but they can definitely be adapted to be a Scrum board. So it depends on what your use case is. With Kanban, it's a little bit more of a free-flowing concept, and there's not a sprint iteration timeline with that. There's definitely reasons and implementations for why you would want to use Kanban over Scrum. So if that's something you're interested in, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to chat about that. But overall, what Trello allows you to do is track, manage, and work within and across teams. So as I mentioned, those Scrum boards in general are there to provide transparency. By putting it up online, you get a chance to actually, everyone has access to it. So it's not something that's hidden that no one knows where the work is being done. So some of the features to help build a Scrum board in Trello is, sorry, really needed water there. You have the ability to make templates. So you have the ability to make a template for your board, but you also have the ability to make a template for your stories. So as I mentioned, in physical worlds, we use index cards oftentimes to write down what is on the story. When it comes to doing it online, you have the ability to kind of put out the stamp of what the template looks like. You're able to put in more detailed descriptions. So as I mentioned, you're able to keep track of more information in here because it is larger than an index card. And they do a really great job of being able to give you sections to organize that information. One of the fantastic things of online tools in general is the fact that you can also assign them to somebody. So if you're working on a sprint and you've got 4 developers and you've got 6 stories on the board, you can actually assign who's working on them. So when they come into being worked on, hey, Maddie's working on this story. So if I have a question about it or need to talk to her about something, she's there. There's the ability to label your stories in there, which provides for a really nice and easy, quick color coding way to look at things. And there is a ton of power-ups, as they call it, which is just different things that companies have written to modify these boards. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on talking about Trello. And I thought it would be best to do this with an example around it. So I went ahead and made us an example. I was trying to figure out what to do. And one of my things I enjoy doing is cooking. So I was thinking about what, example I could make around that. So I decided to make my online cookbook. My issue is the fact that I continuously go back to the same recipe over and over again, but I lose track of the ones that I'm working on or have used before. And, I've opened 15 recipes about this, so they're all the little purple links on Google. So I don't keep track of which website I'm pulling them from. My solution was my online cookbook. I'm going to make a website where I drop a URL in there and it pulls out the recipe, the ingredients, and the nutrition information about that into my website. So going to go ahead and show you guys, this is, I'm not a designer by any means, but I went ahead and made like a little mock-up of what a website looks like, because what we're about to do is develop a Trello board to actually develop this. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and leave here and go into Trello. So when you make a Trello account, this is where you end up. You have your Trello workspace here. We're going to be making a new board for us for this new project. You can see my test board up there. So let's go ahead and give it a nice pretty background and say my online cookbook. You'll realize how bad I am at typing. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and hit create. When you do that, this is the blank Trello board that opens up to you. So you have the ability to develop whatever columns you want. In the Scrum world, as we've talked about, there is the concept of having a product backlog. So this is all the features you're expecting to bring into your board. So I'm going to go ahead and put in product backlog. So that's one of my lists that I'm looking for. The next one was a sprint backlog. So this is what I'm going to be bringing in for that given sprint. So I'm going to go ahead and do sprint backlog. Alrighty. And then from there, so this sprint backlog is what am I doing for these 2 weeks? All right, so we're going from the full project to what am I doing for a 2-week increment? And then the next step from there is what is in progress? What am I, I'm picking up things from my sprint backlog and I'm saying, hey, this is what I'm actually already working on. So this is going to be my in progress column. And then from here, there's a variety of columns that people will add. So I've seen people done QA columns if they have a QA department. I don't have enough time to get into Scrum's not a huge fan of having a QA, or another is a testing column. The reason why for that is as part of being done, every story should be going through that to get across the board. And the developers should own that piece. Opposed to having a QA or a testing department, there's a lot of benefits to the developers themselves taking that ownership when it comes to testing. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that out for right now. But like I said, you can add in a variety of columns between here and what the final column would be. So done. And for the sake of Trello, I have learned that it is better to put in your sprint title here. And the reason for that is at the end, you can just archive this. So you can keep track of what stories have been completed in sprint 1. So 2 weeks are up. I've got, all my 10 stories under sprint 1. I archive this. So it's not on my board anymore because I don't need to look at it once I'm, sprints away, but that way I can still access it. So these are going to be my lists of the day. And of course, Zoom is in my way. So to go from here, as I mentioned, you can make template cards. Keep tracking on the chat. So you can make templates. So I'm going to say this is a feature template. So from here, you have the ability to put in different aspects for that. So with Trello, they use what's called markup, I believe. But you can always just take a look here. So you can actually make your list, your descriptions be very user-friendly to look at. So for me, I want to be able to write out what the business value is. So I'm able to make a header by doing that. And then so as a ... I want to ... so that I can ... And that is the format that a lot of people will use. Not a requirement for you to use by, but it's a good way to really extract what you're getting out of this feature. So that's what I've got here. Another thing that is often useful that I've come across when it comes to actually developing these is what is called acceptance criteria. And what that is these are the things in order for this story to be considered done that I want. And so I'm going to put in an acceptance criteria checklist here. So then you have the ability to put, can a user log in successfully? Check. Yes, they can. Do they have a forgot password option? Yes, check. And the whole concept, these are yes or no things that can be easily gone through and go check, 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 so that is this my definition of done? And part of it is with Scrum, you can develop what your definition of done is, what your definition of done is for your team. And what a lot of that will entail is acceptance criteria for the story is met. Testing is done properly. Run your automated tests and make sure it doesn't break anything else in the product. So those are different things that you can make as part of your definition of done, which allows you to move it to that final column here that we've got. So this is, what I would put as my overarching template, just to make any old feature. If I want to make it specifically for an overarching concept, like I have 4 websites I'm making, right? I want to be able to differentiate them. Then I can label them. So this is for my green website. You can name it, right? So I can write. So we've talked about making iterations of it too, right? So this is all the pieces I want for my MVP. So anything that I want for my day 1 rollout, I can add that label to it now. And so I can keep track of, if I want to have that release, I need to have all my green ones through. And so it makes for a really easy way to quickly see what needs to be done. And then from here, you just create a card from the template. So, I've used the example of login several times. So let's create a login card. So for here is, as a user, I want to be able to log in site so that I can add my recipes to my personal cookbook. So that's what you would put together as a business value. And from here, your acceptance criteria is user can log in with existing credentials. Told you I'm really bad at spelling. User can make a new account. Personally, I would probably make those into 2 stories, but for the sake of example, let's just imagine it was really easy. User for acceptance criteria can, have a password recovery. So as you can see, these are things that, yes, you can do them, or no, you cannot. And that way you can really just check mark them off. And Trello does this really nice thing of telling you basically how far are you through the acceptance criteria. So once you hit all of them, you get a nice 100%, you get your green bar, you're good to go. And that's how you know that it's gone through. And that's how you can put it into your definition of done. So you can have a laundry list of, we'd have multiple stories here. So I have a couple that I've got here written out. So I'm going to go ahead and just, for sake of time, actually, I'm going to save us from that. I'm going to go ahead and go through. So Trello has a ton of power-ups, as they like to call them. So it's basically just fancy ways to make their boards much, much better. So a lot of companies, I don't think Trello is the only one that can develop these. You'll see that there are other ones to integrate with. If you, for example, if you use Jira, I think there's one to integrate with like Gmail or Outlook. So you can integrate it with your other pieces you use in your business. But the one that I have become a big fan of is there's one called Agile Tools. So this will actually allow you to put a relative size on them, like I mentioned. So you have the ability to put, this is relatively a size 3 on the story. And so there's a lot of benefits that can come with this tool here. So to add these bits, you just are able to go through with this. So, as I mentioned, I use the Fibonacci sequence when I do these. So put in those point numbers, put in those limits, and then I'm done. And now it is integrated here with my Trello account. And I can go to a story here, and I can, on the side here, go to Power-Ups, and I can pick how big the story is. So when I'm looking at which story do I want to bring up, you can see here's one that's 0.3 points. It's a smaller one. I can bring this in. Alrighty. Oh, I've got 5 minutes here, so I'm going to take a step back and give a chance. Are there any questions or any examples you want me to run through while you've got me here for a couple minutes? And you can totally use this for your chores, all I'm saying.
Yes, anyone with questions, feel free to unmute yourself. In the meantime, Anjali, how can folks get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I will go ahead and throw, I realized I did not put it on my final slide as with my Q&A slide here, but I will go ahead and put my email address here. And I think Maddie's going to go ahead and send me the list of folks that were able to join today, and I will send out this PowerPoint to everyone so they have something to go through to remember of what's going on, as well as the recording of this.
Very cool. Very cool. It was a wonderful presentation, Anjali. I feel like I learned so much, and I can use Trello in all aspects of my life.
It's fantastic all the way around, but it's really great for project development, especially if you're getting, you're starting off and you don't want to have huge investments. They do have some pretty good low cost or free options depending on your sizes. Is Trello good for calendaring or mostly projects? So Trello does actually, I'll pull up our board here. So you do actually have the ability to, sorry, I've got like all the little Zoom windows open to actually put dates around this. So you can actually, if that is how your team works, right? You are working to develop something by a given date, and it's a necessary thing by that date. Oftentimes if you're working against, I worked for a company that was developing mobile applications. So the Apple release is coming out, let's say, for example, March 1st, and I have to have this stuff in there before March 1st. Otherwise, it's not going to work anymore. So, if you are basing your things off of calendars, there is the option to put in dates here. And there's actually a power-up to my understanding. I haven't used it myself, but there's a power-up that I looked at that you can actually see all of your stories based on a calendar. So it'll actually pop up a full calendar, kind of looking almost like a Google Calendar with all of the tasks that need to be done by X date. So you can keep track of them that way. So it's definitely possible to use for calendaring. It depends on if, we want to take it to the extent of meetings and things like that. I personally am a bigger fan of using something like Google or Outlook for that. But that being said, I bet you can tailor this as you please. And I think that's one of the best things about Trello, not only on the fact that it's very cost effective, especially when you're starting out, is the fact that it has a lot of room for growth. You can update these to however you please. I showed you how to do templates for cards, but you actually, I'm pretty sure, have the ability to do it for boards too. So you can replicate boards if you've got, like I said, 4 websites that you're developing. Set up the structure once and then just said copy paste basically. And they have tons and tons of these power-ups, as I mentioned, that can tailor things specifically to you. So I added one that was around Agile specifically to give me those story points. So you can see those things. Thanks, Jill. I'm glad this was able to be helpful. Is there any 1 minute to go? Well, if that's
I start to use the 6 seconds more in my life as well. Anjali, that was a great tip. Thank you. And thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Wonderful presentation. And thank you so very much.
Thank you. I was happy to be here. I'm glad everyone was able to get something out of it.
Cool. Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful Wednesday, and thank you again.
Thanks all.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.